Welcome to Freethought Matters. I'm Dan Barker. I am co-president with Annie Laurie Gaylor of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We are a national organization which produces this weekly talk show, and we work to educate the public about the views of non-theists, that's atheists and agnostics, and to keep state and church separate. You're welcome to become a member of FFRF or simply ask for more information at ffrf.org. Matt Dillahunty is a very popular talk show host and public speaker who advocates for skepticism, humanism, secularism, and atheism. I think he's one of the best atheist debaters, well, one of the best debaters in the world. He has hosted the Atheist Experience call-in show for more than 15 years, and now he has a second show. It's called The Hangup, and we'll ask him about that in a minute. He's a lecturer, he's a magician, and he serves on the board of directors for a number of secular organizations. Here's Matt Dillahunty at a QED talk.
Let's just get to it. Christians are stupid. And Muslims are stupid. And so are Scientologists and Methodists and Church of England and Catholics and Hindus and Raelians. And so are atheists and agnostics and freethinkers and skeptics. Nobody has a monopoly on reason or stupidity. I find it in not quite equal measures, but it's everywhere. And we can all be both reasonable and stupid.
So, Matt Dillahunty, welcome to Freethought Matters.
Thank you so much. Good to see you again, Dan.
So did you just call yourself and me stupid?
Yes, I did, but mostly you.
Mostly me. Okay, I'll take it. So no matter who you are, you can make mistakes. You can be dumb, right?
That was part of the point. Is one of the things I've heard over the years of doing the shows and the lectures is, oh my gosh, how did you escape religion? Okay, well, I'll talk about my story, but how could you have believed that in the first place? It is the lifelong atheists who often struggle the most with, how could you believe in a talking snake and stuff? Because I was stupid. I was stupid like anybody else. If you don't have the right tools and you don't have the right information, you're probably not going to come up with the right answer. And recognizing that my IQ didn't go up when I found my way out of Christianity, I may be colloquially smarter, I suppose, but I still make mistakes, and so will everybody else. And so let's not be patting ourselves on the back too much for getting what I think is the right answer to the easiest question that's ever been asked.
The more you learn, the smarter you are, I suppose. And nobody knows everything. I mean, there's a lot of ignorance that all of us have. And one of the things I like about you watching your show is that you very often say, I don't know. And there's no shame or harm in saying, I don't know. I mean, isn't that part of the scientific process to say, I don't know something, and I'd like to know?
Yeah, that's the answer that allows you to start looking for the right answer. If you think you do know, investigation stops. You're not looking for an answer if you think you've got one.
So you're a magician. I've never seen you do an act, but I hear you're really good at it. And some people have even said you must have some spooky supernatural abilities. Let me ask you the same question that I asked James Randi, the amazing James Randi. He was a magician who just died recently. We were having breakfast in Copenhagen, and I said, James, you're a magician. Can you make religion disappear? Can you do that?
I can't make it disappear in that sense. I'm trying, though. And I'm trying to make it disappear along with a lot of other superstition and woo. Randy was wonderful. We did an event in Vancouver, and I was really upset by his passing. Matter of fact, my profile picture on Facebook has and will remain Randy and I from an AA event. But yeah.
So you know what he told me when I asked him that question? Without missing a beat, he said, yes, I can, but you can't afford it. So we'll never know, right, if he could do that. Well, he sure tried, just like you. So you were raised religious, right? Were you Southern Baptist?
Primarily, yes.
So what happened? I mean, were you a believer? Did you pray? Did you really think it through? Did you think you were talking to God and seeing miracles and all that? So what happened?
I'm not sure that I ever thought I saw miracles, but I definitely thought I was talking to God. And on occasion, I would think that God was responding. I remember standing in church and, feeling the same thing that people around me felt, sensations of elation and goosebumps when you're singing and praising. And of course, if I don't know what that is and everybody around me says that's the Holy Spirit, then, well, that's just the truth. It becomes the Holy Spirit. And it was upon discovering that maybe there were other explanations and maybe I shouldn't be rushing in to attribute goosebumps to gods, that kind of put me in a mindset of, hey, let me see if I can figure out, is this really true? Because I was going to be a preacher. I've stood up in front of our church as a youth and helped lead those efforts. And I was going to go be a preacher.
Well, you were just like me. I had the same feeling of a calling of God. Speaking of goosebumps, I used to get them too when I would pray, and I'd feel this presence in the brain, and but goosebumps are actually, they're not evidence for a spirit. They're actually evidence for evolution, and I'm sure you know why.
Well, there's lots of different things about cold and alerts and our responses to something, but we're pattern recognition machines. And somebody asked me the other day, or somebody posted something on Twitter the other day asking atheists for an explanation about getting bad vibes. And I kind of view bad vibes and all this in the same realm as this is, as far as we can tell, it's intuition. If somebody wants to attribute it to the supernatural, they've got a lot of work to do to explain how they came to that conclusion, when really it's the product of, we are the survivors of people who have hyperactive pattern recognition. And so when the bushes rustle, our ancestors ran away, whether there was a tiger or not, so they didn't get eaten. And similarly, whatever you want to write off as intuitions, the things that we intuitively leap to, you can train that. That's the whole point of skepticism, is to try to train your gut or train your inferences so that you're more consistent with reality.
Well, because our ancestors also were much hairier. They had more hair. And for thermal control, you raise the hair. Yeah. And when you're afraid, you want to look bigger. So when do you get goosebumps? When you're scared, when you're scared and when you're cold, right? So, but now the hair's gone. What do we got left? Well, I guess it's the Holy Spirit, isn't it?
There's more hair gone here than in other places, but yeah.
That reminds me of the joke or the question that if atheism is a religion, then baldness is a hair color.
Yeah.
You've heard that one, I'm sure.
I mentioned that early on. Atheism is a religion like bald is a hairstyle. But also, one of my favorites is actually a religious joke. My grandfather, who was bald, I remember him telling me growing up that the good Lord made a few perfect heads in this world, and the rest of them he had to cover up with hair. And I don't care if there's a God. I still find that funny and comforting.
That is good. So you do debates. You and I both do debates, and you and I are the kind of animal that just loves being up there doing debates. But I've heard from a lot of atheists, not all of them, but some atheists who think debates are a waste of time. You're not going to change anybody's mind. Why do you do debates?
Well, I don't necessarily do it because I'm trying to change the mind of the person I'm debating, my interlocutor. Although that has actually happened once. We got through the opening and a debate opponent actually agreed with me. I'm more reaching out to the people in the audience who share that person's thoughts and reasons, because they're not on the spot. We know that if you are put on the spot and even shown that your position is false, many humans are more likely to double down. But I'm trying to reach the people who are watching, just like when I take calls on Atheist Experience. I'm trying to reach the person that's sitting at home, rooting for the person who's arguing with me because they share their views. And when they're demolished, they get all the agony of the defeat that they have to deal with and hopefully process. I do, in fact, think that debates can change mind. I don't think they're the only way. I'm not saying they're necessarily the best way. It's just my way.
Well, they can nudge somebody for a while. They can move somebody from a 6 to a 5 maybe, and then later they do some thinking. You and I both debated Dinesh D'Souza, and I saw a wonderful debate with you and him on the stage. Where was that debate? That was New York City, wasn't it?
It was New York City, March 1st of last year. It was right before I went into quarantine. Right before New York got hit. Yeah. I'm not sure how much of a debate it was. There was definitely a lot of arguing back and forth, but it's not like there was a moderator or anything. There wasn't any structure.
So why is it that you and I have debated Dinesh? I debated him 8 different times in 8 different states. Why is it then that you and I are still atheists after debating the great Dinesh?
We are obviously more stupid than Dinesh. I think my favorite thing from that discussion or debate with Dinesh is that On every topic, if you go back and listen, on almost every topic, we would disagree, and he would always go to the money. He would always go to the profit behind it. And I would always go to the people behind it, because I'm a humanist and he's a greedy bigot.
Well, and he's a hypocrite too. I actually met he called him his assistant. She was a young woman who was his fiance, who they brought to this debate. And it broke up his marriage. I met that woman and I congratulated him. He said they were engaged to be married. Well, that engagement lasted, what, a week, I suppose. But you debated Ray Comfort too, is that right? What was that like?
Kind of. I mean, Ray and I did this twice, once on a Christian call-in radio show out of Minneapolis, and then once on a modern day debate. Ray doesn't debate, and he'll tell you he doesn't debate. He will agree to show up to a debate so that he can preach, but he has no interest, and flatly will claim, I have no interest in demonstrating the truth of that God exists. I just love Matt and don't want him to go to hell.
Did he bring a banana with him to the?
He didn't, but I did, and actually. The magic show that I toured Canada and the U.S. with was called Magic and Skepticism, and the opening bit has Ray Comfort doing his shtick about the banana while I do magic tricks with bananas, and so Ray became the voiceover for the beginning of my magic show.
So, I'd like to ask you what you think, in your experience debating formally or informally. What do you think is the toughest issue that we skeptics have to do? What is their strongest argument, do you think? Not that it's good, but what is the strongest one?
Well, I think probably the two that appeal most are the things for which we don't have answers. Why is there something rather than nothing? Because they can apparently give an explanation for why there's something rather than nothing. When the truth is, if somebody asks me, hey, what's the explanation for the origin of everything? My answer is, I don't know. And as far as I can tell, neither do you or neither does anyone. That's a problem we haven't cracked yet, but it can feel like that to people. And I think the second one is, while it's completely untrue, and you and I have both in many debates pointed this out, there's a culture that equates goodness with religiosity, and right down to, do you have a good foundation to be moral? And I think as long as that's still being pushed on congregations and the average person doesn't bother to go and study philosophical dissertations on ethics and morality or secular morality, I think those are probably their two most effective points.
They sell well before an audience then. So what do you say? How can you be good without God?
I think a better question is, how can you be good with a God? Because gods and God beliefs, whether a God exists or not, are divisive. People directly on behalf of their God beliefs have been murderous, warmongering, and cruel. Secular moral systems don't have dogma. They don't appeal to the divine. What we've got is a recognition that our beliefs inform our actions have consequences, and that as long as we're sharing space, what I do can impact your life and what you do can impact mine. And so we use something like game theory to show that cooperation is better, and that you can build a secular moral system with really simple foundations, like health is better than sickness, and suffering is worse than joy, or whatever your foundation is. But the nice thing about secular moral systems is, if you find out the foundations are wrong, after putting this into place, if you start working your moral system and find out that the world gets worse, you get to change it. You get to change any of it. You're not beholden to, no, this is the secular moral system handed down on high. So I'm not just good without God. I'm better than a believer, and definitely better than the believer that I used to be.
And also, you're not doing it just so you can get brownie points and stay out of hell or go to heaven. You're doing it because you care about humans. So social distancing and masks, are those moral acts?
I think so. And I would say that there may in fact be a moral obligation, but at a minimum, there's a moral virtue. I have special masks that I did for Christmas, and
For
I think that
what did you call it?
Things,
Christmas? Did you call it?
Christ Mass.
Oh, Christ
Mass. The Yule, the solstice, whenever Santa's going to show up. So my local grocery store was including those in delivery packages, and I was like, yeah, I'll do a mask with a beard.
So we're going to take a break. After the break, Matt, I'm going to ask you to explain your Gumball analogy, and then we're also going to watch a little clip of you debating a Muslim who's arguing that about consciousness or whatever. So we're talking with Matt Dillahunty. He was the host for 15 years with Atheist Experience, now has a program called the Hangup. We'll be right back after this break.
Hi, I'm Ron Reagan, an unabashed atheist, and I'm alarmed by the intrusions of religion into our secular government. That's why I'm asking you to support the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest and most effective association of atheists and agnostics, working to keep state and church separate, just like our founding fathers intended. Please support the Freedom from Religion Foundation. Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell.
My name is Bill, and I'm an out-of-the-closet apatheist, meaning I don't really care what you believe, and I don't really think that you should care what I believe. I was raised in South Dakota in a strict Catholic family. I was an altar boy. I served Mass a lot of Sundays twice. The priest gave us this little card that said, "In case of accident, please call a priest." I don't really like that idea anymore since I left the church about 40 years ago. Now, if you find me alongside the road after an accident, please call an ambulance and an EMT.
Thank you for watching Freethought Matters. You can find more content by the Freedom from Religion Foundation at our website, ffrf.org. Follow FFRF on Facebook, and you'll get notifications about all of our content, including whenever we go live on FFRF's Ask an Atheist. FFRF is also on YouTube, where all of our programs, including this show and our weekly news bites, are available to watch anytime. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you on the web.
And welcome back to Freethought Matters. We're continuing our conversation with the preeminent debater and skeptic and humanist, Matt Dillahunty. And Matt, let's look at a little bit of you debating a Muslim who was asking about consciousness. Maybe you can tell me what show this was, if it's Atheist Experience or not. This is Matt on one of his TV shows.
Why do you think that consciousness comes from consciousness? Because I see no evidence of that at all.
Okay, you're right. Well, for me, the notion of a creator of everything makes the most logical sense. So if I'm using logic, that conclusion would make the most sense. And
No, sir. Hang on, Muhammad. Saying that you are convinced that a God makes the most logical sense and then declaring that you're going to be logical based on that is actually fallacious and has nothing to do with logic. You are inventing a circular argument by beginning with, I believe that this is the best explanation logically, and therefore logically I will continue to go forward with that. I'm asking, why are you convinced that consciousness comes from consciousness? What is the evidence that consciousness comes from consciousness?
Okay. If you're asking for, well, I can't give you any concrete proof evidence. The only thing I can give you is the probability that I believe in the other alternative. It wouldn't add up to me. If that
I'm not interested at all, Muhammad, or so to be more specific, you keep telling me what you believe. I'm interested in why you believe it. What is the reason you believe it, not what you believe. And every time you try to go to a why, you've come up with another what.
That's Matt Dillahunty. I like how you keep pressing them because they want to turn the corner, right, without really explaining in depth. So that was the Atheist Experience, right?
Yeah, that was Atheist Experience from this year, probably within the last couple of months. By the way, I need to correct something. While I am flattered every time Dan talks about me as a debater, Dan has done a gazillion more debates and probably better debates than I will. I'm trying to catch up to you is what I'm doing.
Well, I don't know if the number matters. I've actually done 137 public, formal, moderated debates, not counting like TV shows in that. And I don't know if I'm any better, but you know what happens? You just get a lot more relaxed. And I think that goes a long way. I think because you've done it so many times, you just sort of you don't have to prove everything in one event. You don't have to hit a home run on you can just let the event happen, and it's a lot more fun. I think you would say the same thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's, when somebody says, hey, would you come and do a debate on this? Or how do you prepare for the TV show? What do you mean, how do I prepare? I've been doing it for 15 years. I've been, and 10 years prior, well, a good chunk of years, but prior to that with the upbringing and study, so that I know how I got from A to B, and I can maybe help somebody else get that from A to B as well.
So, okay, so what is the Gumball analogy?
This is something that Tracy and I came up with, because whenever we'd say, hey, I don't believe in your God, they would immediately demand that we prove that God doesn't exist. And our point was, no, I'm saying I'm not convinced. And so we came up with, Tracy and I put together a courtroom analogy that worked but had problems. But if you were like in a gumball guessing contest, you could try and find the number. But what if all they asked was, is there an even number or an odd number of gumballs in there? We know that it must be one of those two. And so if, knowing that there's only two options, if somebody held up that jar of gumballs and said, do you believe that the number is even? And you say no, that doesn't mean that you believe it's odd. So the fact that you agree that there's only two options doesn't mean that you're not being convinced of one means you are necessarily convinced of the other.
So you could say no to both questions. Do you believe it's even? Do you believe it's odd?
Yeah, you could say, I am not yet convinced of either. But if we're talking about something like atheism and theism, there's a proposition, some God exists. If you are convinced of that, you're a theist. If you're not convinced, you're an atheist or a non-theist, or I don't care, pick whatever label you want for it. I'm not that concerned about the labels. But if I say I'm not a theist, that doesn't mean that I believe that I have 100% proof that a God doesn't exist. And that's the way they always want to frame it. There is a default position. There is a burden of proof. And unfortunately for everyone from every religion that is advocating for the supernatural, they haven't even come close to attempting to meet their burden of proof. So I'm stuck.
And then you also talk about probability and likelihood. If the jar had half blue and half red gumballs and you picked one in the dark, what is the probability that you would have a red gumball?
Right, 50%.
50%.
Yeah.
You would have to say, I have a 50% confidence that this is red or blue. And yet believers don't talk in probabilities, do they? They round it all the way up to 100% usually when they're making their case.
That is perfect. They are constantly rounding it up to 100%. Like if you, and even some of them that have called in this show have flatly said there's nothing that will change their mind. That, there was a quote I read in somebody's book yesterday that if they read in the Bible that 2 + 2 = 5, they would believe it and pray and seek to understand it. And this rounding up to everything is absolute. Well, I'm not saying there's a 0% chance that a God exists. I'm saying the likelihood of a God existing is incalculable, unknown, and hasn't been supported or even argued that you could come close to saying it's 1%.
If they did believe 2 + 2 = 5, you could make a profit off of that, couldn't you? You could probably, what you could make a 20% profit or whatever that comes out to.
Dan, I think you just gave me the motivation for the next new trick in my act, because I've been wanting to do a short change routine on stage for ages, and I can use the 2 + 2 = 5 things to do that.
Well, we'll have to have you come back and do that show. I'd like to see some of your magic. So I think we have time for a lightning round, if you're game for it.
Yeah.
I'll ask you some quick questions and answer them in 30 seconds or less, or whatever you can do.
It's hard for me to ever do anything in 30 seconds or less, so this is going to be really fun because I think I can do it.
So how do you explain the appearance of design in nature? Isn't there a designer?
Well, the appearance of design doesn't necessarily mean design. So seeing localized order is expected. The wind can form sand dunes, but it doesn't mean the wind intended to form a sand dune. And so we live in the environment that allows us to live, and that requires that there be some order. And our pattern-seeking brains sometimes label that order as design.
So we live in a universe. What started it all? How did it get here?
I have no idea. And as far as I can tell, neither does anybody else.
So aren't you really an atheist because you're rejecting moral authority? Don't you really want to be free to sin?
Yes. Actually, no, that's not the reason that I am an atheist now. But there would be nothing wrong with a yes answer. I actually did a video on this a couple of years ago because I used to avoid the yes answer. I used to tell atheists, no. If somebody says you just want to sin, you better have a really good explanation. And then I realized I was wrong, because if they say y'all just want to sin, it's perfectly acceptable to say, yeah, I do, because the things that you call sin, the things that your religion labels sin, I don't have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with sex, with divorce, with, alcohol and drugs in moderation and those things. Your simplistic morality and your concept of sin is something that I actively reject. And I think that's good enough reason to not believe in your God.
We have about 40 seconds. What if I told you that I have personally met God? I have a personal experience and I know he's real.
I'm happy to believe that you are honestly explaining an experience. I just can't accept your explanation for it. Like when someone tells me they're abducted by aliens, I'm willing to believe they've experienced something. I just don't think their explanation for what it is the right one. There's a little more work to be done.
Well, thank you, Matt. It's really been fun having you on the show today. Matt Dillahunty, debater.
Thank you, anytime.
Debater, talk show host. So how can people see it? What's the Hangup is the new show?
The Hangup is the new show on the network Jimmy Snow put together called The Line, but they can just Google Matt Dillahunty, Hangup, Matt Dillahunty, Atheist Experience. Probably just my name will get you into everything.
Well, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching Freethought Matters, because free thought matters.
Hi, I'm Steve Pinker. In my book, Enlightenment Now, I show that the world has become a better place as reason has been overcoming superstition and tribalism. But the values of the Enlightenment are under attack. That's why I'm a proud member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, the nation's largest association of free thinkers working to keep state and church separate. Please join me in supporting the Freedom from Religion Foundation to ensure that our government is driven not by religion, but by reason.